Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Q&A. I'm currently in what feels like a boiler room because of this ridiculous summer heat, and today we have a bunch more questions. The footage in the background is very likely to be my ranger, who is now a significantly higher level, and I will have another video with a log on him coming out quite shortly. I actually have plans for many videos, especially including the Guild Wars 2 2-year anniversary, which is only about a month away. How about that? Anyway, so let's jump into the questions. First one comes from Ahoy Yirno, who says, I don't like ArenaNet's podcasts. They're horribly unprofessional, and in some episodes, I strongly suspect the influence of a recently legalized substance. Sure, their jobs involve games, but I still expect people to be professional when they do a show in their work hours. What is your opinion? I think that's incredibly unfair and critical of you to say. Like, you're in no place whatsoever to accuse them of doing anything, particularly recently legalized substances. I mean, come on, they're trying to show that they're humans. What you need to remember is these are game developers. Just because someone appears on a stream, it doesn't mean they're like a PR guy or a media guy or someone who's comfortable in front of potentially thousands of people. They're human beings, and ArenaNet are deliberately taking a risk to connect you with those human beings, the people who are working on this game you love so much. It's nerve-wracking for them, but they're going to great effort so that you can interface with them in this more real way. I think it's really admirable what they're trying to do, and if they happen to be somewhat jokey or a little bit unprofessional as a means of diffusing this, you know, potentially awkward, scary atmosphere, absolutely they should be able to do that. If you are such a stick in the mud, you have to be all business about this video game you're playing, then I would just suggest you don't watch the live streams. I think you can just get that information from text write-ups people in the community do after the live stream has aired. You know, it's totally up to ArenaNet how they deal with these live streams, and for what it's worth, I think they at least made the correct choice. When we're just having a discussion purely about, you know, how should you do your live stream? Should you have PR guys that don't really know what they're talking about, but they're easy on their eyes, they communicate with the camera well, and they know how to not tarnish the company's reputation, they know how to mold their words in nice ways, and have those on the live stream, as opposed to the actual devs who are maybe prone to slipping up their words, are going to show a bit more of a human side, but will give you a greater understanding into the way they work on the game. Totally go with the developers. I'd pick that 100 times, no matter how awkward it may seem to be. I'm obviously not saying everything's perfect about the way ArenaNet do their live streams, but some things just take time. I certainly couldn't judge them for it. I'm terrified of the idea of live streaming. I'm happy to do YouTube videos like this, but the idea of live streaming, I had a bad experience with it the first time I ever tried it, and I've done it a couple of times since then. But you know, it's a very intimidating prospect, and you've got to give them a little bit of slack, especially seeing as you don't have to watch it in the first place. An alternate view as well, maybe, of this discussion is the fact that live streams don't tend to get many views, and is this indicative of the fact the community is a little bit smaller, or maybe there is a real tangible thing they need to improve on with them? But I've been enjoying them, and the new one they started doing, Points of Interest, I find really quite fun to watch. And I'm happy that they're doing them instead of not. Anyway, before I start talking in circles, the next question is from William Botsford, who says, you mention game experiences on how commentary in a video is different than a game you play yourself. Right now, I'm playing the Mass Effect Trilogy, and it feels weird. It's weird because I'm playing it straight through, while other people waited years for each game, gradually getting excited for it each year. Do you agree that playing a trilogy like Mass Effect straight through is different than playing it year by year, and playing straight through may even ruin the experience? Very interesting discussion. My experience with the Mass Effect franchise was I played 1 and 2 together after they were both already out, so I didn't have that gap. I think that was a really good experience for me because I got to experience, you know, rather significant gameplay and story improvements between the two that just sort of happened in the blink of an eye. But I also, not so much for video games, but definitely for TV shows, I can understand people missing out a lot of stuff if they don't have to do the waiting, if they don't have that time to reflect. I rewatched it recently, and honestly, watching it now, I don't like it as much as I think as I once did. But Lost, I was super into when it was originally coming out, and those waits between seasons were hellishly long, ridiculously long. Even the waits episode to episode were very, very significant. In those 1 week waits between every episode, you could get online, you could look at a bunch of trivia, you could look at a load of hints, you could look at stuff that the casual viewer of that show would never catch if they were just watching it in serial. And I remember introducing the show to friends, and they would watch, say, the season 1 finale, and they're like looking down the hatch, and then boom, straight away they're in season 2 and they're going through and everything's exploding and getting all sci-fi, and they don't have that time to sit back and reflect. I think absolutely the same thing happens with video games. games. But in a way, it puts me off with video games. Mass Effect in particular, I mostly picked this question because my experience with this franchise was I played 1 and 2 back to back, and those are long games, especially if you play them back to back. Then we had the long wait for Mass Effect 3. During this wait, I started very excited for Mass Effect 3. Then it waned, and then it waned, and then it waned, and then Mass Effect 3 finally came out, and all I could think was, I can't play this game without redoing Mass Effect 1 and 2. Like, there's too much stuff I've forgotten. There's too much that will happen in Mass Effect 3, and I won't have all these cool things to reflect on and all this trivia and all this understanding of the universe. I'm going to have to replay it. And then all I could think was, my god, Mass Effect 1 and 2 were so long. I was in that weird spot where I wanted to replay it because I'd forgotten a lot of details about the universe and the franchise, but it was also too soon since I'd last played them both, and I didn't want to go through the effort. And to this day, that's still the reason why I haven't played Mass Effect 3. I don't have it in me to go through all of that previous stuff just to catch up, and so in that way, the wait was very damaging. And it's funny, you could almost have the exact same discussion about Guild Wars 2, this long wait for Season 2, except we never had the option of replaying Season 1 in the first place, so people really don't have a choice. And maybe that's, in a very bizarre way, something for the better in the way they released Living World Season 1. The next question is from MagicJan29, who says, "Hey WP, something's been bothering me about the living story since the last patch. I can't help but notice that player character happens to know that the name of the new Elder Dragon is Mordremoth. Now, I know that pretty much everyone in the Guild Wars 2 community, who had at least the slightest interest in speculation, already knew the name of the dragon anyway, but it bothers me that my player character was able to conjure the name Mordremoth seemingly out of nowhere when asked about the vines sprouting around Drytop. Do you find this to be a gaping plot hole on ArenaNet's part, or was there a piece of lore I'm missing where Mordremoth's name was officially unveiled to the player?" I went through a thing when Season 2 started. I was really debating, do I Let's Play Season 2? Interesting idea, right? And I sort of Let's Played the very start, and the first thing I noticed at the beginning of the first episode of Season 2 was the mail we got that introduced us to the story. Now, this discussion, this question you've given me, has flared up in the community since Patch 2. For those out of the loop, basically what happened was we kind of knew it was Mordremoth in the community because the devs had confirmed it in interviews, the devs had confirmed it to me personally, but in-game, our characters never had any idea necessarily that the dragon was even doing anything. We saw an abstract cutscene in-game of a dragon waking up that A, our characters didn't necessarily see, and B, even if our characters did see it, there's no way they would have derived the name Mordremoth just from seeing some dragon underground opening its eye, so how did they get the name? Well, I was expecting some kind of an interesting story to do with this, as were many other people. I thought, hey, maybe there'll be a little bit more of the lore from the dwarves, like how did Zaitan get its name? I think too few people have been asking questions like that in the light of this, and we know the names of the other Elder Dragons because they came from the tomes of the dwarves, so I thought, oh, maybe this could be a cool link that they do in Season 2, and this is how we eventually get the name Mordremoth. Well, they've just brushed over all of that, haven't they? And everyone seems to be outraged because it's just like, oh, okay, what are we fighting? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're fighting Mordremoth. But people are outraged at the wrong time. You're all asking me this question now on Patch 2. If this happened on Patch 1, the very first mail that we got in Patch 1, what introduced all of us to Season 2, was a mail from E. And in this mail he said, "I'm sure you've heard the many rumours about Mordremoth having woken up." That was when they did it. That's when they jumped the gun and said to us, don't worry about any real lore about how we get the name. Apparently there's just rumours out there. So when someone asks me, hey, how did we know the name Mordremoth? We knew the name Mordremoth because there have been rumours in the community. That was answered. But the offence is still there. It's just like once removed now. Now the question is not, hey, why does our player character know the name Mordremoth? It's, hey, why do general people in Tyria know the name Mordremoth? And something tells me they're not going to answer that at all. They had a perfect opportunity to answer it and they decided to try and sweep it under the rug. Maybe they thought people wouldn't care or notice, but certainly they did. Like, this was a big question asked by many people. That's not my take on it. I think it was stupid, but you're all a little bit late. I was offended last week. Yay for Living World Guild Wars 2 hipster levels. They're all there through the roof right now. The next question is from Christopher Byerly, who says, what's the lore you tell yourself to explain why in Guild Wars 2 and in any other MMO, we the player are able to respawn and come back to life and yet NPCs can't? Interesting question this, because you never die in Guild Wars 2. And you might be saying to me, what are you talking about? Of course you die in Guild Wars 2. No, you don't. You go, you lose all your health, you go downstate, and then you go defeated. They actually talked about this before launch, saying, we're using the term defeated instead of dead. because it was always kind of weird to us that basically what you're saying in this question, the NPCs and stuff could die, and then we could just be respawning all over the place. No, the idea is you're defeated, and how the waypoints stop you from being defeated, who knows, but your characters never die technically in lore, so when you see a character die in a cutscene, it does work out that way. But I do find it funny that I'm getting this question, and it sort of shows that even though they changed the terminology in Guild Wars 2, it still doesn't matter. For the record, there was lore about this in the first game. This is the whole idea of Grenth as a god. Grenth as the god of death is a god that says, do you know what? Dead isn't dead. Whatever. Look, you can be resurrected. And there were resurrection skills in the first game. The idea that you were fully dying, but you could bring that spirit back to the mortal realm and everything would be fine. And there, this weird disconnect was very prevalent. They set up the story that before Grenth was the god of death, there was another god called Doom, and the difference between Grenth and Doom was a bit more of a hard ass. Doom would say, if you're dead, you're dead. I'm not going to allow any kind of resurrection. What are you talking about? Resurrection magic? No, you're dead. Which is kind of weird, because the idea of life, that seems to be like Dwayna's domain a little bit, right? So that's always been kind of weird. But then when Grenth usurped him, Grenth was like, you know what? I'm a nicer god of death. Whatever, you can revive. And this is why, like, there's a bit more of a problem with the undead and so forth. In some ways, you could actually say Doom perhaps was the better god of death, but obviously that's open to your own opinion. But yeah, the Guild Wars 2, you're not dying. You're being defeated. As for other MMOs or just other games in general, honestly, I don't care that much. It's one of these lore areas where lore has to cross with gameplay in a weird way, and usually when it gets to those grey areas where you're writing weird stories to like justify player stuff, I find it easy to write off and not care about much, because that's not the essence of the story they're trying to tell, right? Sometimes a game developer will do very well, like think about the original Bioshock. Why was that so good? It's because it was taking gameplay tropes that you never expected to be justified by story, and then justified it in the story, and it blew your mind because you thought that kind of stuff was off limits, and they did it so well. But you know, Guild Wars 2, the Guild Wars franchise, no MMO franchise as far as I'm aware, is really of that caliber of storytelling, so I just ignore it. Next question is from Papa Bungle, who says, hey, I have a question. Neither of us are big fans of the Elder Dragons as villains. They have no depth as characters, and their motivations can be brought up as devour the world. Just because. Sin from FFX is presented as exactly that for a significant portion of the game. My question to you is, why do you think Sin works as an interesting antagonist while the Elder Dragons don't? Two core reasons I'd put this down to. There's probably a lot of other facets to this, but reason number one is you see the destruction of Sin many times. FFX structures itself incredibly well, right? Early on in the game, where it's teaching you, the player, what to care about, right? Which is defeating the big bad boss, Sin. Early on in the game, he shows up time after time after time again, and you get these phenomenal, like, destructive cutscenes where you see him killing people and destroying civilizations, and you get to see the negative impact he's had on the world, and you do learn to have some drive to fight against him. You find out how he's stripped all of these families of their mothers, their husbands, their sons, their daughters. You see how it just destroys everything anyone ever builds together, how it's formed this entire, like, religious state. And then you see that all very early. And then there's no sin for ages, like ages and ages. The main goal, and your motivation hasn't changed, is I want to kill this thing. But you haven't seen it for ages, but the motivation doesn't wane that much, and you still find him an interesting antagonist. You still want to go after this guy. That's because they set it up so strongly early. Guild Wars 2 was the opposite of that. You saw barely anything of Zhaitan, any indication the Elder Dragons were doing anything. You never really see Zhaitan himself attack a damn thing. You just hear he's this objective at the end of the path. And at the end, yeah, you might finally see a couple of flashy scenes to do with him, gameplay mechanics of the final dungeon aside. That drive was never there in the first place, and it was never so strong. That was reason number one why it was done so badly. Number two was even Sin has a bunch of stuff both humanizing it and putting a lot of interesting mystery around it, mystery that is resolved. Yes, Zhaitan has mystery. Why did he awake? What is he doing? Why does he consume magic? But those are mysteries we're only just now diving into, and even now it doesn't seem like we're guaranteed those answers. FFX, we have the confidence of knowing it was a standalone single-player game at its original inception that was going to tie everything up, and so you were playing because you knew those loose ends were going to get tied together. Something open-ended like an MMO, and certainly with the way ArenaNet do things, that motivation to do with the mystery side, you have no confidence that that's ever going to get resolved. It just seems like an excuse to fight someone, and the actual story behind it didn't matter. And yeah, of course, the other side of Sin is that you have this weird connection to him, right? Your character in Guild Wars to, for all they tried, had no real significance. Like, you had no connection with Zaitan. If you were Sylvari, it was your wild hunt, but that was just something you were told. There was, like, no emotional connection or payoff there. In FFX, the main character, the main dude you're playing as, has this unexplainable, at first, connection with this thing, and this feels like a personal quest for you. So that's why Sin works so much better. I do really think it's reason A more than anything else, though. Just that you get to see the destruction he invokes on people, and his sheer power, and that exciting idea that eventually you may be able to topple it. The Elder Dragons, they just didn't have that. Maybe that's a good reason, by the way, why we should see Mordremoth early on in Season 2. Yes, it would kind of spoil the mystery of what he looks like to an extent, but maybe we should have that direct thing. Yes, he's attacking things with vines and stuff, but he's still like this separate entity right now. If we actually saw him killing things, maybe he'd be a bit more interesting. Overall, though, I'm sour to the Elder Dragons as I ever was. The final question is from Nuggets00, who says, did you manage to get the diving goggles, or did you just give up? This was the footage in last Q&A. I did eventually, but I must admit I cheated on it. I'm not usually one for ever using portals in the game, but I got so frustrated. That footage, it was harder for me to do the jumps. I will justify it, because while I'm recording, my computer's kind of crappy. I can't afford to upgrade it or anything. My computer's kind of crappy, and I wanted to play with really decent graphics, show off the decent graphics. So I'm playing with quite low FPS, and it is more of a struggle than it would look to watch back on YouTube. So that's my excuse during the video. But the truth is, actually, I tried for like an hour before I even recorded that to do the same thing. I just couldn't get the hang of the final jumps. And then shortly after recording the video, I was just doing it, and someone randomly portaled me. I know, a guildie came along to help me to portal me up, and then I got the diving goggles. And after like 3 failed attempts to hit the water, I finally did it. And I was like, I'm done. I'm done with it. It's a beautifully difficult jumping puzzle. I'm glad it's there, even though it was difficult. I kind of like the bit of frustration every now and then. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's the Q&A for today. Leave any questions you may have down below, and I will see you next time for more Guild Wars 2 stuff. As I say, lots on the table. Stay tuned, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll catch you next time.